Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and we got big news, something that kind of plays into something that we've been warning about for a long time, and that's a Zero Hedge article that reports Russia plans first ever sale of yuan bonds. Of course, the yuan is from China, and as the article kind of goes into, Russia hired Bank of China Limited, Gazprom Bank, and Industrial and Commercial Bank of China Limited to arrange investor meetings for the sale of 6 billion yuan, $907 million, in 5-year notes, according to people familiar with the plans. The issuance is slated for the end of this year or beginning of 2018, they said, speaking on condition of anonymity because the deal isn't yet public. And it's going to be, it's big. Let's just put it that way. The question on a lot of people's mind is the US dollar doomed? Of course it is. But so is the yuan. So is every single fiat currency. But this is big news because, as we've talked about before, the people are flocking out of the US dollar. There's swaps across the board through countries around the world as a world reserve currency, and China has been trying to move themselves up to the top of the heap and be the new world reserve currency, especially with this push for a cashless society, as the IMF talks about moving to Beijing in the coming years, and then the IMF wants to put out their special drawing rights coinciding with the cashless system, which is mostly just for the bankers. But in the end, if your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's the bank's. And if your money's going through the banks via digital transactions, legal tender laws, you don't hold it in your hand. The bank owns your money. The bank owns you. You are in servitude to the banking system and the government hand in hand. And that's why it's so dangerous. So I had to point out the cashless part for a second there. But John, what do you think about this sale of yuan bonds to Russia?
Well, it's a way for the Russians to get away from the U.S. dollar system by issuing their debt in yuan instead of going with U.S. dollars. Also, it's just another sign like this. Mike Maloney called it nails in the monetary coffin for the United States, and that's what it is. It's just happened so rapidly now that we almost see, like, we did a whole list on why people are moving away from the U.S. dollar. We saw that. I think the biggest thing is going to be when Saudi Arabia decides to price their oil in gold. That I think that is going to be the defending end of it, because they were the one that started with Kissinger going down there and setting up the petrodollar.
Well, yeah, and it was pushing for the Trilateral Commission. So yeah, Kissinger in the early 1970s went there without Nixon's permission to meet Mao Zedong, who of course killed 50 million people. Conservatively, could be more like 60 or 70, some historians say. It's communism at its finest, folks. But with that said, there was this push to create this union between the United States and China, and then moving forward through Zbigniew Brzezinski in the late 1970s under Jimmy Carter, was this creation of the Trilateral Commission that would create this monetary ally between China and the United States that would really just create this future deep state organization that will push towards basically centralizing everything. It's a globalist regime, really, and it's a globalist monetary regime. And this is exactly the end goal that they wanted. Absolute technocracy, as Patrick Wood says and has told us here at WAM, and this push into the cashless special drawing rights world currency.
Yeah, no, it's this is just another nail in the coffin. And what is happening next is you're just going to see so much more people leaving and going away from using the US dollars. The next one, when that big drop in the bucket, for example, as I said, Saudi Arabia decides to get away from the US dollar and using it for their oil trade, then you're going to see mass exodus from US dollars. And what's going to happen with all those dollars that the US have been able to shove out into the world to hide the massive inflation that they created with the US dollar? It's going to all come back into its own borders, and you're going to see massive hyperinflation and a potential devaluation of the US dollar, a huge devaluation, as this money keeps on flooding back in.
Let's make this clear, because we always have new viewers. All fiat currencies eventually revert to their intrinsic value of zero. They always have, they always will. Going back to 1024 AD in China, we've just seen it hundreds of times happen over and over again. They print it out of thin air. They just create massive amounts of it, centralize it. We see it just surrounded by debt and devaluing of the currency, causing inflation, which is a price of living going up. It's a hidden tax. It constantly rises. And we've seen this system throughout the world. I don't think there's any country in the world right now that isn't using fiat currency. But I think that it's really important that we as individuals understand this dangerous system of centralization, of central banksters working with the government, collaborating with them in order to enslave us in debt servitude, because it's perfect for them. It's a perfect storm. They shove us down that bottomless pit of debt, and we're forced to ask for a ladder up from the government and banking system, which puts us in perfect servitude. And let me make one final point here. Recently, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin in the United States, of course, announced that he was going to potentially cut China off from the US dollar due to North Korea sanctions that he says they weren't following, and the Bank of Dandong has already been cut off. So this is a perfect storm for China. This is exactly what China wants. This is the move, the incremental move into the global currency, which China hopes to lead. I think that there's some talk about maybe it's not going to happen that way, because that monetary system is breaking and crumbling at the seams, and we see right now this push for the cashless system, but it's out of desperation by the bankers as they are trying to push interest rates high enough to keep the dollar up so they could drop it out when the dollar comes tumbling down, but they can't do it because it'll go negative. And as we saw from 2008 to about 2012, they dropped 5.5%. That's nothing compared to the epic scale that they're going to have to drop into negative interest rates. So they are desperately pushing for this cashless system.
Yeah, well, what we're seeing too is also a 500-year east-west cycle that we're seeing that I can clearly see because the China was very powerful back with their fiat currency from year 1000 to almost 1500. Then it was of course Europe that took over, and the Western countries, and now we're seeing that move back again because we have it's an overextension of the monetary system, the paper monetary system, and when people see through that, and like over enough years, people are getting fed up with that system, and that's when the cycle moves to another country.
Absolutely.
And,
well, I'll just cut in for a second, John, in saying that with this cashless system that's being unrolled, at the same time, this also means with the bail-in regimes that are being pushed forward, Mario Draghi at the EU is talking about not being able to ensure that the stolen money from your bank accounts, which bail-ins basically are. And then on top of that, you can't do a run on the bank if there's no money in the bank. And this is a whole system that they want to develop so they can enslave us from all ends of the spectrum, both political, monetary, market, etc. And this is why we need to be ready for this massive calamity.
Yeah, if anybody of you paid attention to what Mnuchin has been up to lately, he is trying to gain and give confidence back to the people. He was at the Fort Knox saying, oh, there's lots of gold here. And then he was at the Federal Reserve holding up a sheet full of Federal Reserve notes.
And then thought it was a compliment to be called a James Bond villain. And he did something that no human being should ever say, and say from the James Bond. He didn't say James Bond. He called the movies the James Bond.
I heard that. I never thought I'd be quoted as looking like villains from the James Bond. I guess I should take that as a compliment that I look like a villain.
I mean, this guy, I don't know, man. He's not cool.
He's twitching all the time.
He's like a robot trying so hard to be human. But
it could be, yeah.
But it's so, and his wife.
Well, he's another bankster. That's what he is. Yeah.
But in the end, it comes down to the solutions, which everyone wants to hear. So I'll just lay it out really quickly, like we always do. Food, water, shelter, self-defense so you're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block, gold, silver, that which is decentralized, Bitcoin, assets, and looking for financial responsibility, self-sustainability, responsibility, because you can't have freedom without responsibility. And when we talk about gold and silver, yes, it's manipulated by banks through paper ETFs and held down like a beach ball. But once that banking system goes down, which it will bounce up. The fundamentals are off the table due to the level of manipulation in the monetary system and the markets, but we know it's going to come down. We just can't put a date on it. So be prepared. It's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. Folks, that's all we really need to say. We've gone over the subject a million or so times here at WHAM, but John, do you have a final word?
Well, yeah, the US dollar is on its death throes, and what's happening, as I said, massive inflation is coming its way because of this mass sell-off in US dollars that are upon us at any given time. It could happen, so be prepared, guys. It's so important.
Absolutely. So thanks for watching, everyone, and until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth,
Be the change.
Like what you see here at WAM, don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon, we can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized and censored by YouTube as the Anti-Defamation League comes in and flags all of our content as hate speech. You can also find me at Josh Sigurdson at steemit.com. That's steemit.com, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post via Steem, the cryptocurrency. You can also find our Bitcoin address in the description and the comments below, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And don't forget to come on down to Anarchapulco in Acapulco, Mexico in February, one of the best events of the year, and you can save money on your tickets by typing in promo code WAM. That's WAM. We'll leave the link below for you, and until next time, don't forget to subscribe. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.